right.
I am so glad to have both of these guests with us because I've long admired what each has done and the issues they've tackled and the results they've gotten. And I'm thrilled that we're having this whole plenary session on the care economy and what caring means. And this panel will be followed by another terrific panel with more specific recommendations that Chelsea and the panelists she will have will be focused on. But I wanted especially to talk to Darren, president of the Ford Foundation, and Governor Newsom, governor of California, who has been working on these issues as well. Because we need solutions, we need to know things can work, we need to have leaders in the not-for-profit, philanthropic sector, obviously in the public sector and the private sector, who take these issues seriously. As Ai-jen Poo said in the beginning, it is like an iceberg. Everything else we do, I don't care what field of endeavor you're in, is built on a foundation of caregiving. And therefore, it's just as Rosalind Carter said in that great video, there are only 4 kinds of people. People who have been cared for, who are being cared for, who will be cared for, or will be themselves caring. So it's very much in the spirit of this that we look at how the care industry is the fastest growing sector in the world, from child care, elder care, disability care. It supports over 1 billion people, 1 billion people in both formal and informal roles. But the work is chronically undervalued and underpaid, and it's no coincidence that most of the workers are women. So we have to find better ways to empower and support the workers who make up the care economy, but also to make it affordable for the people who need care. That has always been at the heart of the dilemma. So let's jump right in. Gavin, you obviously are in a unique position. You happen to be the governor of the 5th largest economy in the world,
Soon
California.
to be 4th.
Soon to be 4th, okay.
Yeah, man, I'm just eat your heart out, Germany, but we're not there yet. Forgive me.
And you have just led a $2 billion increase and expansion of child care for working families with low incomes, and you've expanded California's paid family leave from 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, number one, how did you do it? And what are the lessons that others can take from what you're doing in California as to how you can help parents, workers, employers try to really grapple with the care economy?
Well, you did a wonderful job sort of level setting and framing this conversation. We did it because we had intention. We did it because we frankly had neglected this space for too long. We did it because we said that we were going to do it. We did it because it needs to be done. We set forth a vision under a master plan in the state for early childhood education, a vision for master plan for seniors and those with disabilities, and then we laid forward a strategy on workforce development. And in that sort of Venn diagram came a framework of focus, and that advanced a $2.6 billion commitment for 200,000 subsidized childcare slots. It advanced a paradigm that you were considering that's incredibly important to us, and that was empowering the workforce, not just subsidizing costs, but empowering the workforce by unionizing the workforce. And we had the biggest unionized expansion in this space in American history 2 years ago, led by SEIU. And as a consequence of that, not only are wages rising, reimbursement rates are rising, consciousness and focus in the legislature has risen, and now we are funding more programs and doing more in this space than, frankly, we could have ever imagined. So I'm proud of that. In addition, in closing, the 6 to 8 weeks is a down payment on what I hope one day I can attach myself to, which is 6 months. That's our goal. That's our goal. That's hard.
It is hard.
The 6 to 8 weeks was hard. And last year we expanded those that actually can get that leave, so there's more flexibility. That was hard. So we're on that, that's a journey. We were able to advance that in 2019. Now we have more work to do. But this, to me, is just foundational, not just as a parent. We know in terms of this crisis of belonging, this dignity deficit we're all trying to address, this sense of social isolation. I mean, this is so foundational to our fate and future, and that's why I'm honored to be here with you as a champion for decades on this and a practitioner as well for decades. Thank you both.
Well, I am, I am delighted to hear about this commitment. I want to get back to you with some of the questions that members of the audience and others might have about how you did it, how you pay for it, and what's in the future. But I want to turn to Darren first because, one of the things I love about you, Darren, is that you were in the very first class of Head Start students in America. When we developed that Head Start program all those years ago, you were one of those little kids who went to Head Start, and I've heard you talk about it, and I've heard you talk about what a difference it made to you. How has that influenced your commitment on, furthering gender equality and disability rights in the context of the caregiving economy work that you've been working on?
Thank you, Secretary. It's great to be with you, and of course, Governor. It has affected me because when you grow up poor, you have a lived experience that informs how you see the world. And what I find in philanthropy is that there are not many people who are presidents of foundations who grew up poor. And so it gives me a perspective. It gives me a perspective often of what it feels like to be excluded and marginalized. My mother was a caregiver, a low-paid black woman, because you said women. They were mostly black and brown women. Mm-hmm. And those women are not valued. And we see it in this city every day. In my neighborhood on the east side, on Madison Avenue or Fifth Avenue, you see black and brown women walking with an older white person, escorting them, sitting with them in the park, in restaurants, because they are alone but for that woman. And the salary, the compensation that that woman is receiving is almost poverty wages. So one of the real challenges we have in this society, particularly among we affluent progressives, is reconciling our own behavior with our rhetoric. Yeah. And what I mean by that is do we ask? Because all of us have someone. And do we ask, how much are you actually being paid to take my mother to Central Park every day? And do we then raise hell with the provider when they tell us what they're actually making, right? So there's that dimension of my own experience. But then in philanthropy, the question of what should philanthropy be doing here? And of course, you've been a champion of this from your earliest days with your friend Marian Wright Edelman and the Children's Defense Fund on these issues on the front lines. And it is so important that philanthropy get behind these kinds of initiatives, because they were your partners too, Governor, in helping you get it done.
100%.
And the role of philanthropy is to sometimes support the agitators, the troublemakers, the people who help you do what you want to do, and who give you cover when you need, who invest in the research and the data and the information that gives you the evidence you need to make good policy. Right. But we in philanthropy aren't doing enough of it because we worry about funding the troublemakers and about the risk associated with certain kinds of organizations who are out marching, who are out making those who are powerful account and be accountable to the very public they're supposed to serve. So we've got work to do in philanthropy, and we certainly can do more and do better at Ford. But with people like Ajin Poo on my board, I feel good about how we're going to do it.
It'll be all right.
Well, you know, everybody should just remember John Lewis's encouragement to cause good trouble. And that's really what you're talking about. And, you know, Governor, you've done this, and a lot of people are going to say, well, that's California. You know, California, they do these things.
Yeah. Give me a break.
We don't know how they do it. We don't know where the money comes from and you know, all of that. And so part of the challenge is, as you speak about these investments, what did you say, 1.46 billion to...
Just on the workforce. Yeah.
On the workforce.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, look, a couple thoughts, and I want to get to that only, California. You know, there's the old adage says, once a mind is stretched, it never goes back to its original form. It was philanthropy that stretched my mind as a candidate seeking the office of governor. I didn't understand enough about poverty. I thought I did when I was mayor of San Francisco. I was lieutenant governor, but I didn't understand that our interventions came too late. I was focused 0 to 5, not 0 to 3. No. I was focused on Head Start, not early Head Start. Right. I was focused post-birth, not prenatal care. And you shifted that mindset. You allowed me to understand that 85% of the brain within the first 3 years is developed. That people aren't left behind, they start behind. And all of a sudden started shifting our policy framework. So then I promoted a promise in a campaign. I said, this is what we value, this is what we prioritize. In the language of the 60s, we want to eliminate ignorance of poverty and disease. This is the way we do it. People were frustrated about the persistence of childhood poverty and the like, generally, wealth disparities. So what are you going to do differently? And we set forth that commitment. It's general fund money. It's not new taxes. It's, again, statement of values, your budget, what do you value? It's reflected in that priority. And it didn't come from the legislature first, it came from the governor. It was a commitment that the administration made, enhanced by the legislature, and with the expectations of philanthropy, supporting advocates to raise the bar of expectation of performance. But I gotta tell you, nothing empowered me more, and this is not me just, you know, asserting a labor paradigm for a purpose of a politician doing so. Nothing prepared me for the power of organized labor entering into this space to change the conversation. And that conversation, you want to talk about wages. We're not just talking about wages. We're talking about benefits now, and we're talking about careers, and we're talking about the dignity of this workforce, and as a consequence, now being able to recruit more people into this workforce, which is our #1 challenge going forward. 1.46 billion reasons why we attach that commitment, but it's a drop in the bucket unless we make this sector of our economy a sector that people look forward to entering into, not someplace they fall back into.
You know, Governor, explain to us the payment dilemma, because I've had a million conversations about care for the elderly, care for children, care for people with disabilities. And one of the questions always is, but how can the people who need the care afford the care if you increase the wages of the people providing the care? Because whether it's the example that Darren gave of, you know, accompanying an elderly person to Central Park, or caring for somebody with disabilities who needs 24/7 care, how does the payment formula actually work?
Well, I mean, look, candidly, we're subsidizing those child care slots. That's that $2.6 billion. And it's not just the slots, it's the quality. We don't just talk about slots. We want quality. I want outcomes. And we've moved away now from slots. We are looking at quality, which means we're investing in facilities, which is a big part of the quality dilemma. I had $273 million last year just for facilities improvements. There's a physical issues, not just the human capital. We also did something, and I'm really proud of this. And we talk about childcare in the traditional sense, but one of the profound dynamic changes in California is we created a brand new grade. I can't believe we got this done. We created a new grade, pre-K for all. And we connected it to what we refer to in California, it's called Prop 98. It basically locks in the funding through a formula for public education. And it allows for a percentage of the entire budget that goes into now the pre-K through 12 system, and provides 3- and 4-year-olds that high quality experience as well. And so that was another strategy, a twin strategy for locking in that commitment and letting people know that we're gonna be here in the long run. This is not a situational commitment. This is a sustainable mindset, and that allows us, again, to focus on quality.
And I think it's important that people start making comparisons. So, you know, the federal government, state governments, we subsidize a lot of things. Exactly. We subsidize oil and gas exploration and extraction, for example. We even subsidized Tesla for Elon Musk in the time when he was trying to get started. Oh, yeah. We subsidize so much when it comes to the business side, say nothing about agriculture. Why do we do that? Because we assume, sometimes correctly, that we need to get that subsidy out there in order for this activity to not only go forward, but produce some kind of profit so it can be fed back in. So when you talk about subsidizing care, that shouldn't get people all up in arms. They should think, okay, that is a value judgment. Absolutely. And Darren, one of the things you've been doing is to build at the Ford Foundation a strong and just care economy for over a decade. You've been working on this, you've been funding it, you've been looking for pioneers and people like Ai-jen Poo, who you know are at the cutting edge of what it means. And in 2021, you, along with other leading philanthropic organizations, announced the formation of the $50 million Care for All with Respect and Equity, the CARE Fund. So how is this going to work? And are you looking at the full spectrum of caretaking? Because, you know, we saw Eddie out here is so inspiring, and, you know, the people with disabilities, we want them to be able to live as full a life as possible. Children, we want to get off to a good start. The elderly, we want to have, you know, lives of dignity, people along the whole age spectrum. Talk to us about what your vision for that CARE fund is.
Well, the $50 million is being distributed primarily to nonprofits working to advance policy change. And it funds organizations like the National Domestic Workers Council and many other organizations across the country. And at the core is the idea that that we foundations have organized ourselves in lanes of grant making that do not align with the way people live their lives. So the way in which most communities are organized are not by our program areas. And I use my own mother again her life was deeply intersectional before Kimberly Crenshaw was born. And because she was a poor Black woman in rural America who had mental health issues and who was raising 4 children on her own and trying to make a life and to live with dignity, which for a poor Black woman in rural Texas in the 1960s was hard to come by. And so how do we fund in a way that recognizes, as our beloved Judy Heumann used to tell us, it's all intersectional. To imagine race, gender, disability, so many other dimensions of life and identity. How do we fund organizations who themselves have that mindset? That means that some organizations have to transform themselves. There needs to be new organizations with some of this money who didn't exist a few years ago. And then there's some legacy organizations who just need to go out of business because they are still in an analog ideology in a digital world, right? And so how do we help those organizations to, as a funder, to say, we're not going to fund you anymore because you aren't able to evolve the way you need to evolve. And so that's the work of the fund.
Well, it's so exciting to hear the two of you talk, and I want to give each of you just a minute or two to sort of sum up where you would like to see this vision for caregiving that each of you is working on end up? Where are you headed, Darren, with what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, for me, this is deeply personal. I would love to imagine it is possible to be my mother and to imagine a life, a livelihood with dignity. Imagine being able to actually pay your rent, not have your kids come home to eviction notices on the door, not have your son at his debate club waiting you, not knowing that your car has been repossessed and you can't pick him up. Imagining a productive economy, a prosperous society that actually values a segment of our society, primarily Black and brown women, who we have never, ever in this country's history valued. Is it possible to imagine that that group of women can live with dignity?
Wonderful vision that everyone should be, as you hear, motivated by. And finally, Gavin, for you, what is your hope for this?
You know, that's a hell of a question to ask me after that answer. But, you know, it's interesting, and maybe I can sort of connect back to your point about California. I feel about our state, you know, we love to say about California, the future happens in California first. We're America's coming attraction. In good ways and more challenging ways. When we started that master plan for aging, it was with a recognition of this golden wave, this aging ingrained population, of which I've now entered into, the silver tsunami, as some have referred to it, and the fact that we have a state of dreamers and doers that disproportionately was aging and graying, and we were unprepared, are unprepared. We started to frame this notion of not just an agenda in that context, but looking at 2 generations. And the experience that I had with my father with dementia in a wheelchair that came back to my sister's home, and we converted the garage, and we struggled to find in-home support service and to supplement what we were receiving with private dollars. And all of a sudden, that deeper recognition. And so for me, it's part of that larger agenda, and it's part of that larger narrative, and it's part of our values of who we are. And I think if my wife were here, she would also offer this insight. We also want to bring to light that care agenda, not just from the more traditional workforce, but traditional roles in the house. And men have a little explaining to do. We have to step up our care responsibilities as well. We place too much of that responsibility on women, and we have a responsibility to recognize that. And I think that's also an important part of the dimension of the conversation that needs to be brought into this debate as well.
Well, that's amen, amen. So thank you to Governor Gavin Newsom, to President of the Ford Foundation, Darren Walker. Stay tuned right after this now, yet another dynamic panel talking about how we're going to make all of this work, how we put into action this vision that the 2 of them have shared with us. Thank you both.
Thank you.